Margaret Tate is a real iron lady. The publishing house, where she operates as the editor-in-chief, is managed by this woman with a firm hand. If you need to get a reclusive author to appear on the Oprah show for the sake of advertising, Margaret will achieve this. If you need to fire an incompetent employee, begging and complaining will not stop her. Subordinates are afraid of her, calling it and which behind her back, and only assistant Andrew Paxton manages to get along with the insufferable boss. A charming and enterprising guy manages to find a way out of the most impasse and is not afraid of extra work. It took him too long to get promoted, so if you have to skip your beloved grandmother's 90th birthday to work on the weekend, Andrew doesn't mind. However, the Iron Queen also has failures. The authorities suddenly called Margaret to their place and said she didn't submit documents on time to extend her visa, and therefore she'll be deported to her homeland in Canada. For Margaret, this is a fiasco. She loses everything: a good position, an impressive salary, even the right to work in the United States, and the editorial role is about to go to Bob Spalding, the very employee whom the woman fired. Margaret desperately looks for a way out, and her eyes fall on Andrew. A woman has an idea. She informs the boss that she will soon marry her assistant since they have long been in love, so there is no need to renew the visa. Andrew is stunned by the news, but he has the wit to play along, and only when he is alone with Margaret, the man demands an explanation. The woman is calm. They only need to portray spouses until the deportation service forgets about her. Andrew tries to object, but the boss reminds him that after her dismissal, the assistant himself will be on the street, which means that the man has no choice but to accept her plan. Unfortunately, it is not possible to obtain a marriage visa. The fired Bob reported the fictitious marriage to the deportation service, and now the couple will have to try to prevent Margaret from going to Canada and Andrew from jail. And they first have to visit Alaska and inform their relatives, who gathered to celebrate the 90th grandma's anniversary, about their engagement. Along the way, Andrew slightly takes revenge on Margaret for years of humiliation, seeking a promotion and a contract to publish his chosen book and then forcing a strict boss to propose to himself on his knees. The couple flies to Alaska. On the plane, Margaret and Andrew are preparing for a deportation service interview. The woman is displeased that the companion knows almost everything about her, from allergic foods to her tattoos. Moreover, something about her is also known to Andrew's relatives. It's not for nothing that grandmother Annie, who meets the guy at the airport, jokes about how to call the guest, Margaret or Demonis. In the town of Sitka, where Andrew's parents live, Margaret is in for a few surprises. Firstly, her assistant's family, the Paxtons, is wealthy. They own clothing stores, a photo studio, a post office, and almost half of the business in the city. Secondly, Grace's boyfriend's mother canceled their hotel reservation, and they will have to live in the family home. And thirdly, Andrew is not at all as submissive as he seemed in New York. He plays a joke on Margaret, makes her carry the suitcases herself, declaring her a feminist, and she independently climbs the stairs of the pier. However, the guy does all this not from evil, but mischief. Margaret meets his father at a festive dinner where all of Andrew's relatives and friends gather. The man, whose name is Joe, frankly disapproves of his son and speaks condescendingly about the publishing business. Ultimately, he completely reproaches him for wanting to make a career through bed. Otherwise, why would he bring his boss to the family holiday? Annoyed, Andrew, who wanted to keep the news of the engagement under wraps for now, announces the wedding, causing Margaret to choke on her snack. But there is nowhere to retreat. The guests demand details, especially since among them is Andrew's ex-girlfriend, Gertrude. Straining their imaginations and quietly teasing each other, Andrew and Margaret impromptu devise a romantic story about how a man proposed. But the tests do not end there. The guests are delighted and demand a hot kiss. The couple touches each other with their lips and suddenly realizes that both are enjoying what is happening. But Margaret is unprepared for the dormitory Grace and Annie allocates to them. Unlike the father, the women fully approve of Andrew's choice, and the grandmother even offers them a blanket, which, according to legend, promotes pregnancy. Like a real gentleman, Andrew sleeps on the floor, giving up the bed to the boss, but Margaret cannot fully enjoy her sleep. At dawn, she is awakened by a call from New York, forcing the woman to jump out into the street so as not to wake up the whole house. It turns out that doing business with Alaska is not so easy. You must fight off eagles, save the Paxton family's pet, and worry about losing your beloved phone. And then there's Andrew, who suddenly appears and playfully pesters her because his mother and grandmother, who planned Margaret's shopping, are watching from the window and may be suspicious. It's not easy for Andrew himself. The father wants to retire, passing the business on to his son, but he categorically does not want to leave New York. Meanwhile, Grace and Annie throw a bachelorette party for Margaret at a local bar, inviting stripper Ramon to the party. The dance of the overweight clumsy guy does not inspire the woman, so she goes out for some fresh air and runs into Gertrude. The girl says that Andrew proposed and invited her to go to New York together, but she did not want to leave Alaska. Also, the guy did not want to stay home because of a conflict with his father. Their relationship is still tense. Margaret understands this when she hears part of Grace's conversation with her husband. She furiously accuses Joe that she has not seen her son for years because of his character. Margaret and Andrew go to their rooms separately and undress to shower, unaware of each other's presence. The man's music rumbles from the player in his ears, and the woman fends off the too friendly dog with a stream of air from the hairdryer, trying to get to the towel. As a result, both collide naked in the middle of the room and, in embarrassment, begin to hide behind whatever comes to hand. However, everything that happened, the warmth with which they met Margaret and the Andrew family, the man's difficult experiences because of a quarrel with his father, spending the night in a shared room, suddenly makes the woman open up. In the evening, lying in bed while Andrew settles back on the floor, she suddenly begins to talk about herself. About a tattoo made in the year of the death of parents. About love for the book Wuthering Heights. About her crying in the bathroom after insulting a fired Bob. The two have a heart-to-heart conversation for a while, during which Andrew also thaws. He tells Margaret he thinks she is charming and amuses her by singing the woman's favorite songs. In the morning, they are almost surprised by their parents, who have come to talk about something important. Andrew somehow manages to get into bed with Margaret and awkwardly hugs her. It turns out that the family had a great idea not to postpone the wedding, but to hold it immediately, while all the relatives are gathered. Timid objections are not accepted. After all, not someone asks the bride and groom, but the grandmother herself, who dreams of having time to see their marriage. Andrew agrees, although internally, he is worried, not knowing how he will tell his family about a future divorce. Margaret is outwardly more confident, but doubts do not let her go. A woman finds a bicycle in the yard and goes to unwind. In the woods, she is intercepted by Annie, who performs ancient shamanic rituals of gratitude to Mother Earth and invites Margaret to join. Oddly enough, the absurd ceremony captivates the woman, and she begins to dance around the fire torch, shouting thanks to the earth. Andrew saw this and was amazed at how his boss could look and act because he previously believed that Margaret was allergic to human feelings. Andrew and Margaret go to town to get a phone to replace the one the eagle took. The woman sees how Gertrude communicates sweetly with Andrew and feels jealous. But there is no time to ask him. The guy's mother and grandmother again intercept the couple and take the bride to try on a wedding dress. During the fitting, Margaret feels terrible because Grace asks if they can visit the newlyweds in New York. Annie gives her a family jewel passed down in the family from generation. For the first time in years, Margaret finds no words to answer and feels her voice fail her. On the way back, part of which must be done on a boat, Margaret grabs the helm and turns on the highest speed. To the astonished Andrew's questions, Margaret tearfully replies that she has forgotten what it's like to have a family. For many years, she did not feel what it is like to be among people who love you and will take your deceit hard. Andrew overrides the rudder, causing the woman to be thrown overboard and barely able to grab onto the buoy. The man drags the sobbing Margaret on board and hugs her tightly, trying to warm and comfort her. She does not resist. Now she needs Andrew's support. A deportation officer arrives in Sitka and tells John of his suspicions about the couple. The father wants to save his son from prison and a fine, even almost making a deal, but Andrew refuses to participate. He again confirms that he truly dates Margaret and intends to marry her. The night before the wedding, the future bride and groom traditionally spend separately. Both are awake, thinking about what is happening. At a solemn ceremony led by stripper Ramon, Margaret hears his heartfelt words about family, friends, and true love between loved ones and suddenly stops the wedding. She tells those present about everything, takes the blame on herself, and leaves the ceremony. Andrew hurries after her. He has not yet figured out himself, but he understands that he does not want the woman to go. In their room, he finds a manuscript he wanted to publish and a letter from Margaret saying she will keep her promise. Gertrude follows him into the room. Despite Andrew blaming Margaret since she left without speaking properly, Gertrude sees that he is upset and simply asks if he is going to catch up with his fake fiancée. That's exactly what Andrew does. Joe objects. He is ready for anything to prevent his son from making a mistake, and everything would undoubtedly have ended in a fight if not for Annie's heart attack. On the plane that takes the older woman to the hospital, she asks Joe and Andrew to make peace. The men readily agree, after which Annie smiles slyly and rises from the stretcher, reporting that she has no seizure, and then forces the pilot to head for the airport from which Margaret is to fly. Unfortunately, when they land, the woman's plane is already in the air. In confusion, John looks at his son, realizing he loves his boss. Margaret is packing her things at the New York publishing house when a disheveled Andrew shows up at the office. The guy reports that the trip to Alaska changed everything for him. Andrew saw Margaret from a new side and fell in love with her, but realized this only when he was left alone. The man says he wants to be with her and asks Margaret to marry him. She resists. It is easier for her to be alone. She is not ready to open her heart to love, and she is afraid to succumb to feelings. But as soon as Andrew kisses Margaret, her arguments crumble to dust. The woman gives her consent. The couple reannounces their engagement and agrees to pass all the necessary checks. There is no doubt they will succeed.